Good day, everyone, and welcome. I'm Michael Gallagher, the Executive Chairman and founder of the Stevie Awards, and welcome to this live webinar about how to prepare effective entries for the 2025 Stevie Awards for Great Employers. Over the next hour or so, we will talk about the Stevie Awards in general and some strategies for preparing and submitting award-worthy nominations to this year's 10th annual competition for the Stevie Awards edition that recognize excellence in HR. I'm joined today by Jackie Barant. She is a specialist in preparing effective nominations for human resources competitions. Welcome, Jackie. And why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I welcome this opportunity to share some of my expertise and success in with my clients and getting great exposure. And the Stevie Awards are somewhat new to me. I only learned about them in the last about 3 years, but it's been a wonderful thing to find out. And I want to thank you for having me, and I want to thank everyone for joining. This is going to be a great investment of 1 hour. You're going to be very impressed with the things that you're going to learn today. So thank you, Michael, and thank you to everyone who's on board today.
Thank you, Jackie. So we are recording this session. So if you have to step away, we will make the recording available to you. And if you have any questions for us at any time during this next hour, just add them to the chat. Some members of our staff will be monitoring that and may answer them in real time. But we will reserve the last 10 minutes or so of this session, hour-long session, to address questions in general. So on we go. We recognize that many of you may be new to the Stevie Awards, so I'll tell you a little bit about them. We have 9 Stevie Awards competitions. And by the way, you'll notice we have a number of slides that are pretty text heavy. I'm not going to read all of this. We're going to give you the slides and you could read them at your leisure. I'm just going to talk about the points covered in general and perhaps some of the points that are more important than others. The Stevie Awards were established in 2002. We now have 9 competitions. Those 9 competitions now receive more than 12,000 nominations each year from organizations and individuals of all types in more than 70 nations and territories. You can see some of the major brand names of organizations that have won Stevie Awards, such as DHL, Toyota, Hilton, Google, Microsoft, Tesla, among others. But most of our winners every year are small and mid-sized organizations that are still building their brands. And consultants like Jackie can tell you about the importance of winning major awards and helping smaller organizations build their brands. The Stevie Award has come to be recognized as one of the top awards around the world for recognizing achievements in the workplace. Pretty much anyone can submit a nomination, and 30 to 40% of entries typically in the competitions win some level of recognition. And that's gold, silver, or bronze. Sometimes it's higher than that. For example, in the Stevie Awards for Sales and Customer Service, another one of our programs, this year, 39% of all nominations received some level of recognition, but it's typically in the mid-30s. The Stevie Award trophy has become one of the most coveted prizes around the world. It was designed by the same company that, at that time at least, made the Oscar and the Emmy and other major awards. And the programs are judged by more than 1,000 people around the world every year. A typical competition ranges anywhere from 150 to 400 judges. Now I'll tell you very briefly about each of the competitions. Again, because we understand that many of you are new to this experience. The oldest program, the first one we started, was the American Business Awards. That's open to all organizations operating in the US, don't have to be headquartered in the US, but operating in the US. And actually the extended final entry deadline for that program is this Thursday. And that has categories to recognize achievement in all facets of the workplace. The International Business Awards is our second oldest program, and like the American Business Awards, it has categories to recognize achievements all over the workplace, but this particular competition is open to all organizations worldwide. The 2024 edition received more than 3,600 nominations from organizations in 62 nations and markets. That recently opened. It has an early bird deadline next week, another deadline in May, and then a final deadline in June. The Stevie Awards for Women in Business will open for its 22nd edition in May, and that recognizes the achievements of female entrepreneurs, executives, and employees at organizations around the world. The Stevie Awards for Sales and Customer Service is our program to recognize achievement in sales, customer service, and business development. We recognized and announced the 2025 winners in that competition back in February, And the award ceremony for that is actually next week, Thursday, April 10th in New York City. The Asia Pacific Stevie Awards, the 12th edition of that, will actually notify the winners tomorrow and announce those winners on Thursday. Excuse me, on, yeah, what day is it? Yeah, it's Tuesday, on Thursday. And that recognizes innovation in the workplace in 29 markets in the Asia Pacific region. The German Stevie Awards recognizes innovation in the workplace in German-speaking Europe, and that's the 6 nations in which German is an official language. That program recently opened for entries, and we'll have a final deadline in June. The Stevie Awards for Great Employers, the program we're mainly talking about today, is our HR Awards program. And since we'll talk about that in detail, I won't say any more at this point. The Middle East and North Africa Stevie Awards recognizes innovation in the workplace in 18 nations in the Middle East and North Africa, and that will open again for entries in November. And finally, our newest program, which we launched last year, is the Stevie Awards for Technology Excellence, and that recognizes achievement in technology in 20 different technology sectors. So it's not just information technology. There are categories to recognize achievements in agricultural technology, architectural technology, transportation technology, biotechnology, and so on. And that program recently opened for entries. There's an early bird entry deadline this month in April. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So those are our 9 programs, which I've whisked through very quickly. Jackie, I know you've got experience with a couple of them. Do you have any comments about any of them? I know you mentioned earlier to us that you had an experience last year with the Stevie Awards for Women in Business with one of your clients.
Yes, and I would say that one of the great things about the Stevie Awards is all the different possibilities and finding a category that's just right for you. Previously, my clients have had 100% success rate. I'm so proud of them. They're amazing. They do amazing things, and I love the fact that they were able to be recognized. In the HR, there's individuals and teams that can be recognized, which gives you a lot of leeway in deciding what works best for you. And then the women in business has so many great categories, and you're able to focus in on individuals. So I really like the opportunity to pick the award that category that suits you the best. And then within that category, there's so many great possibilities, and you can go for more than one, which is a wonderful way to repurpose the work that you've done.
One of the questions we get most often from potential entrants is, you have 9 competitions with a lot of categories. How do I sort through them all and figure out what's the right category for us? And typically what we'd ask you to do is to send us an email outlining the types of achievements you're pursuing recognition for. And then we can recommend specific categories in one or more competitions that we think that you should look at. So if you have that type of question, by all means, email us at help@stevieawards.com, and you'll see that and other contact information later on in this presentation. But let's talk about the Stevie Awards for Great Employers. That's why you're here today. It's our HR Awards program. It also has categories to recognize Employer of the Year. We're in the 10th edition of it right now. Any organization or individual anywhere in the world can submit nominations. Last year's competition had more than 1,000 nominations from organizations in 35 nations and territories. There's a link on this PowerPoint where you can see the winners. But the website for this particular program is stevieawards.com/HR. Last year's competition was judged by more than 130 professionals worldwide. We have a unique feature in the Stevie Awards for Great Employers, in that in the Employer of the Year categories, the results are determined by a blending of the ratings of our professional judges and the votes of the general public. So let's say that the judges, if you submit a nomination, the judges give your nomination an average score of 7 out of 10. Then for every 1,000 public votes you're able to garner by publicizing the voting process to your customers and social media followers and employees, for every 1,000 votes you get, we'll add another point to that average score. So if you get 1,000 public votes, we'll add that 1 point to your average score from the judges of 7, and you have a final score of 8. And we determine the winners in those particular categories that way. But that's only in the Employer of the Year categories. Again, I'm not going to read everything on these slides. You can do that at your leisure when we send them to you. The category groups in the Stevie Awards for Great Employers include the Employer of the Year categories, which I have already mentioned. HR achievement categories, they tend to be the most popular, different types of achievements related to HR. We also have HR individual categories, and most of those are free to enter. There are a couple of those for HR executives where we require the payment of an entry fee, but most of the other HR individual categories are free. Now, they're free for a time. After the May deadline, we will begin charging a late fee of $55 per entry for even the free category. So if you're averse to paying entry fees and you want to nominate an individual in one of those categories, make sure you do it through the second entry deadline. There are team categories to recognize different types of HR teams, to recognize solution providers for the HR industry, categories for different types of solutions and implementations of solutions and training programs and HR related media, and also categories to recognize thought leadership related to HR. Jackie, any comment on any of this before we move on?
I would say that it's in my experience with entering many awards in addition to the Stevie Awards, that I believe that the Stevie Awards that have the individual free entry fee, that's quite a prize, and it would encourage you to go ahead and try if you've never tried before and you are a little hesitant. The fact that there's no entry fee is a great impetus to get your feet wet and give it a try. So I think that's a great thing that you offer, and I encourage many of my clients to take advantage of that.
A lot of people, of course, are shy about nominating themselves for an award, and we're going to talk more about that later. But you know, if you, as an individual, have achievements over the past 18 months or so that you're quite proud of, have a go at it. Prepare a nomination outlining your achievements and submit it in one of these categories, especially in the free categories. It's, you're essentially playing with someone else's money, right? It's worth taking the chance. On this slide, we're outlining the new categories. You can see there's quite a lot of them in the new categories in the 2025 Stevie Awards for Great Employers. Most of these require the payment of entry fees, but you can see on the individual ones, it actually states there is no entry fee for this category. And there are quite a few other free categories under individuals. So we encourage you, once you get the entry kit, and we're going to talk about that process and why that's important. Once you get the entry kit, to explore all the categories. And again, if you explore all the categories, you may find that there are 3 or 4, even more, that might relate to the kind of achievement you're looking for recognition for. We'll talk about strategies and how to pick the right category for your nomination in a little bit. Here's the calendar. Of course, beginning with today's webinar, we have an early bird entry deadline next Tuesday, final deadline on May 7th, and then a late entry deadline on June 11th. The judging runs from May through July. The public voting component for the Employer of the Year categories runs from mid-June to mid-July. Then we'll notify the winners in mid-July, and we do notify winners of other final results in July, so that you then have 2 months to decide whether you want to come to the mid-September awards ceremony in New York City to be recognized on stage and to give it an acceptance speech. And one of the unique things about Stevie Awards programs is that you don't have to come to the awards ceremony. Once we announce the winners, they're final. Your attendance at the awards ceremony doesn't affect the results at all. And you can be a winner and not come to the awards ceremony. You could be a winner and not even want us to send you your award. You may just want to use the free badges and press release templates and other resources we make available to winners. So there's a lot of options there. The only required payment is an entry fee for a category that requires payment of an entry fee. Everything else, like attending the awards ceremony or paying for the shipment of your award, is optional. We often have people say to us, especially people who are interested in more than one of our awards programs, we send out a lot of email. Human nature being what it is, you may have requested the entry kit for the Stevie Awards for Great Employers last November, and we got an entry deadline next week. Typically, if you're like most people, you're going to wait till the last minute to submit your entry. So we send out a lot of email reminding people about entry deadlines. And sometimes people say to us, gosh, you people send out a lot of email. Is there one email I can get so I can unsubscribe from the rest of them? And the answer is yes. You should just get our weekly email newsletter. It comes out on Thursdays. And it always has reminders about entry deadlines and profiles of some of the winners and past judges. So if you only want to get one type of email from us, make it the email newsletter. It comes out on Thursdays again, goes out to more than 30,000 people around the world. We recommend that you get that. Jackie, I'm going to just run through some of these quickly and ask for your comment on some of these. On each of our Stevie Awards program websites, we have a list like this of 10 reasons why you should enter. Most of these are common to all 10 competitions. I'll just go through some of the more important ones. Entering is a cost-effective way to thank and honor your valued employees and to build or burnish your organization's brand. We find that large organizations have very different reasons for entering awards programs than small organizations do. Smaller organizations that are still building their brands see winning an award as a brand building tool. But as we saw earlier, we also get nominations from and often have in the winner's circle world famous organizations that have already built their brand. So they don't need a Stevie Award win to build their brand. But what they do need, or especially what managers and teams in the organization need, is they need recognition on the team level. So from some of these larger brands, we tend to get nominations from team leaders who want recognition for their particular team. There's scores of categories to choose from. One of the reasons we have so many categories is we recognize all organizations are different cultures, obviously different businesses, different industries. And if we had a narrow range of categories, that would narrow the types of achievements we would look to recognize. And we don't want to do that, right? We want to make sure we have a lot of categories so there are available categories for any type of achievement. And again, I'm not going to read all of these. You can do that at your leisure when you get access to the PowerPoint. Jackie, I'm going to ask you to comment on some of the reasons why, in your experience, your clients looked for recognition in awards programs like the Stevie Awards.
Yes, well, and particularly with great employers, great employers are built on great employees. And so it's quite a morale booster for an organization to have its employees recognized. It's a great internal morale booster. I know some of my clients do it for that reason, because it's a way to affirm and show appreciation for the great work that the employees are doing. And it really does work. Everyone loves a winner. Everyone wants to be associated with the winner. And, it's great to know internally that you're wonderful, but when an outside organization and some very prestigious top execs and the judges acknowledge you that way, it really means a lot. And CEOs add it to their PowerPoint slides when they go out. And you all are so great in number 10 about giving us the free tools to plaster it, literally.
Yes.
Spread the word from the rooftop. So it's not a lot of work for the internal PR departments or to do it. And it really is a morale booster inside, and then of course the obvious recognition outside, to see that you are a brand of importance and that you're doing the right things.
Yeah, I want to add to point number 10, because that is an important one. Our view is that awards are tools. And like any other tool, it's only as valuable as what you do with it, right? So with a hammer, it can gather dust in a garage, or you can build a house with it. And an award is the same thing, right? So if you're a Stevie Award winner, you can take your award back to the office and put it on a shelf in your lobby. It can gather dust there, and it's not really worth very much there, is it? We do make free tools available to you. If you go to on the Stevie Awards for Great Employers website and go into the awards section, there's a page called Winner's Circle, and you can see the tools we made available to 2024 winners in the competition, including winner logos, press release templates, suggested text for social media postings, a link to a form you can fill out if you'd like it to be profiled on our blog and our newsletter. And we encourage you, if you're a Stevie Award winner, to make use of those tools. Again, awards are tools, right? So, you need to use them to build your brand, to build rapport with your team. You can find lots of different reasons why you should do that. But what you don't want to do is just take the award and put it on a dusty shelf, right? Okay, moving on. Some of the past winners, some of the quotes from past winners. Again, I'm not going to elaborate these. There are links here where you can see some of the acceptance speeches from the winners who attended last year's awards dinner, and some of the interviews we conduct with winners on the red carpet at the event. All winners who come to the event have the opportunity to do both. And you can see there are some major brands there on the logos. but there are probably more brands that you're not familiar with, right? And we only showcase organizations that are winners, and it's not because they are household name companies. We focus on winners that have interesting stories that we think others want to learn about and be inspired by. So let's talk about the process, right? So we've talked about what the Stevie Awards are and what the Stevie Awards and Great Employers are. Let's get into the process now. And people often say to us, "Wow, you've got 9 competitions, a lot of categories. It looks like I have to do some work to prepare a nomination. Maybe I'm a little bit overwhelmed." So don't be overwhelmed, right? So the first thing you should do, if you haven't done it already, and I presume since you've been on the website, you probably have done it, is get the entry kit. And on most of the Stevie Awards websites, there's either a form on the homepage or a link to a form where you can request the entry kit. And all you got to do is plug in your name and email address, and the entry kit will be emailed to you. And the entry kit is typically a PDF of anywhere from 20 to 50 pages that lists everything that you want to know about the competition. The calendar, the list of categories, what the submission requirements are for the categories, what the entry fees are, if there are entry fees. Once you prepared your nominations, how to submit them, some tips on how to prepare your nominations, and some of that stuff we're going to cover today. It's all in the entry kit. So if you haven't gotten the entry kit yet, after this webinar, go on the website, fill out the form, and get the entry kit. Once you follow the instructions on how to prepare your entries, and you've prepared them offline, one of the things we advise you to not do is just write your entries on the fly online. You write them offline so you have a permanent record of them. Once you're prepared to submit them, you'll go back on the website, you'll find a link to registering, you'll create an entry submission account, and then the process of actually submitting your entries, once you've created your entry submission account, and you'll basically go on into your account, pick a category, copy and paste your entry into the online entry form, and then submit your entry. If an entry fee is required, you'll have the option of either paying for it immediately by credit card or choosing to pay by bank transfer, and it'll generate an invoice. You can do that later. Sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot. Jackie, you've been through this process with countless clients. Anything you want to add to that before we move on?
The number one thing is to start with what achievements. If we really are looking at what did you do that was great and had an impact. So that's how you really want to get started. If you think as a team or an individual, what is the achievement? That's what we're looking for. So once you get that locked in, it's the rest of it's fairly pedantic because you can figure out what to do. It's pretty self-explanatory.
We often get emails from organizations saying, this is what our organization does. Which category should we enter? And we reply, well, that's not what we want to know. We want to know what you do, but we want to know what you've done, right?
Yes.
So with the competition, we typically have a moving window. And for the 2025 Stevie Awards for Great Employers, that window begins on January 1st, 2023, and ends at the final deadline this year. So your achievements should be in that window. And next year's competition will have a different window. But you need to think about what it is your organization or the individual you want to nominate has done during that window, right? And then you need to tell the story of that achievement and fit it into the right category, right? That's the most important thing. It's not what your organization does, but what it's done during that window. That's really important. Entry preparation tips. So here's where we're going to get into the meat of how to prepare effective nominations for the competition. And these tips don't just apply to the Stevie Awards for Great Employers. They really apply to all Stevie Awards competitions and really all awards programs. These are not particular to the Stevie Awards competitions, but we'll run through all of these very quickly. Get started. I mentioned earlier that human nature is everybody wants to wait till the last minute. You may be inclined to wait till the last minute to prepare your nominations, submit them. We really recommend that you don't do that. Get started a couple of weeks before whichever deadline you're going to enter, so that you're really taking your time to prepare really effective nominations. If you wait until the last minute, chances are your nomination is not going to be nearly as good as if you had taken your time in doing that. In Stevie Awards competitions, most entries we receive are in essay format. Many categories have an option for submitting a video instead, but we still get, most of the entries come in essay form. And in most categories, you have the option of submitting supporting materials with your nomination. And they can be press clippings, customer testimonials, demonstration videos, photographs, what have you, depending on the category you're submitting in. And in most categories, submitting supporting materials is optional, but we really recommend that you submit supporting materials to back up the claims you make in your nomination. We understand in many categories that may be difficult, but at the very least, you should include a link to your organization's website. Make sure that you focus on achievements during that eligibility window that I mentioned. Sometimes we'll get nominations that say, this is what we've done since 2014. That's not a good entry, right? You may want to provide some context to your recent achievements by saying, what you've done in the recent past before that window, but your nomination really needs to be focused on achievements during that window. Stevie Award categories typically have minimum and maximum word lengths, so you want to make sure that you observe that. Since most nominations are submitted in writing, you want to make sure that they're prepared by someone who's actually a fairly decent storyteller and writer, and that's what someone like Jackie specializes in. So if you don't have someone in your organization that can really sit down with your team and distill your achievements and and outline those achievements and then portray them in a compelling story that explains to a disinterested third person, and that's where a judge really is, because the judge may be an accomplished professional, but they may not know very much about your organization, maybe even very much about your industry, right? So one of the crafty things about preparing a nomination is not only do you need to describe your achievements in a way that a disinterested third person can achieve them, but you have to do it in a way where they can kind of understand your industry and the importance of your achievement to your organization and your industry. And if you can do that in the allotted amount of space for a Stevie Awards nomination, which is in total typically about 600 words, if you can do that, that's a work of art, right, Jackie?
Right. I can't say enough good things about this one because, that's what we do. That's our specialty. And we also give an outside view to what you're doing. I can't tell you how many times I've said to my clients, well, tell me what you did. And they say, well, would this count? And they've done some fabulous things, but for whatever reason, to them, they didn't feel like they were significant. So coaching is a large part of what we do as outsiders to get us to you to tell us what it is that you really did. And then be really careful about jargon and particular things to your industry. I have what I call the grandmother test, which is would my grandmother would your grandmother understand what you're talking about here? Because every industry, healthcare, financial services, whatever it is, has its own processes, its own lingo, and a judge is not necessarily going to know anything about that. So you have to make sure that, get someone else to look at it. Doesn't have to be a grandmother, but get someone else to look at it and make sure that what you're saying is going to resonate with the judge. So I think that, when you have someone who's a good writer, they're looking at, they have grammar, they know how to edit on the fly, they're really, really going to save you a lot of time. So I want to put in a big pitch for number 5.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about number 8 because number 8 is not Jackie, right? Jackie's a paid consultant, right? So Jackie's the kind of person where if you need help preparing your entries, you turn to someone like Jackie. If you've prepared a nomination and you think it's good, but you want to get some objective feedback on it before you submit it, send it to us, and send it to me. And my email address and our general help inbox email address will be presented to you at the end of this. Send it to us. We'll give you some free feedback. It happens all the time. You might think that I get inundated with nominations from people looking for feedback when I offer this, and I don't. And most people don't do this, and I really encourage you to do it. I'm not a judge. My opinion doesn't matter, only in that we've been doing this for a long time. I know what the judges tend to like and what they don't like, and we are going to talk about that in a minute. But if you've prepared your nomination and you just want another set of eyes to give you some feedback on it, happy to do that. Doesn't cost you anything. It's not going to hurt you if we really don't think it's very good and it needs more work. So send it to us at the Stevie Awards. But again, only send it to Jackie if you really want somebody who's going to do it for the entire process for you. Okay, moving on. What makes an effective nomination? This is probably the most important slide in the entire presentation, and we will go through this slowly, and I will go through every one of these petals on the flower, starting from the top. So you want to be laser focused on achievements in your selected category and the eligibility period. We've talked about this already. So, it's okay to briefly mention, in one paragraph when your organization started and what its history has been, but the bulk of your nomination should be on what the nominee, and the nominee again can be an individual or a team or organization, has achieved since the beginning of January 2023. Can't emphasize that enough. Secondly, you need to illustrate how those achievements have made a difference in the lives of colleagues, employees, stakeholders, et cetera. And when we get to a slide about the typical judges' critiques of nominations they don't like, this is one of the things that they comment on a lot. That okay, you've said that your organization has done this, has made this significant technical achievement, but how has it made customers' lives better? How has it made your colleagues more productive? How has it influenced the bottom line of your organization? Nothing that we do exists in a vacuum, right? Everything is done for a purpose to make somebody's life better. So it's very important in your nomination to make that link for the judges. Tell them what you've achieved, and then tell them what the real world results of those achievements are. That's really important. You want to make sure that the claims that you make in your nominations are supported. I know sometimes it's really hard to find supporting materials. If you're nominating a non-executive individual HR specialist, maybe a benefits specialist, and we have a category for that. Maybe there's not a lot of press about that person, or they're not mentioned in press releases, but you can certainly provide a link to their LinkedIn profile. You can certainly submit a testimonial letter from their manager talking about how effective they've been during the eligibility period. Submit something, right? It's important to back up your nominations with supporting materials. You want to make sure the nomination is prepared as a compelling, well-told story. All of history has been told in the form of stories because that's what we as people relate to. We relate to stories. We don't relate to bullet points. We don't relate to statistics. We want to know, how the achievements are portrayed, why they were conceived, how they were executed, and what the results have been. That's a story, right? And if you don't have someone in your organization, or you haven't already engaged a consultant who can help you do that, turn to somebody like Jackie who specializes in doing that. That's really important. The judges are people, and regardless of how familiar or unfamiliar they are with your organization or industry, if you can tell somebody who doesn't know anything about your company or your industry about your achievements and the real world results, and they can understand it and appreciate it, that's an award-worthy work of art, right? And you need somebody who can help you do that. The final pedal is that the nomination should be written in the third person. What do we mean by that? Most of us are not braggarts. Most of us have a hard time talking about our achievements in our own voice, right? That I did this, and I did this wonderful thing, and I've changed the world. But if you write that and then change the tense as if someone else has written it about you, that he did this, or she did this, or this person did that, and it's really made an impact on this organization, you'll find that you'll write a more effective nomination if you change the tense. Give it a shot. If you're nominating yourself for one of the HR individual categories, first write your nomination in third person as if you're telling your own story, and then change the tense and make it about as if you're writing about someone else. I think you'll find that the nomination is more compelling. All right, so Jackie, we've covered each of those. Any comments that you want to make on any of these in particular?
Oh, yes. I want to underscore the compelling, well-told story. And I have a client right now who hired me because they were very good at compliance and what she called checking the boxes, accreditation, things like that. But when it came to how that was a story, they weren't good. And so that's why they wanted me to help them. So I've explained to them that it's like a sandwich, if you will. We have the question, why? We start with why. Why did you do what you did? What was the business need? Was there a problem, a challenge? And then what did you do? What was the solution that this great achievement? But then the final piece that has to be there is, and so what? And so because you did that, what happened? What was the impact? And I'm always digging and asking for more impact. So it's very, very important that those three things be there so that you have that compelling story. And it's not just check a box, but it's a real story.
One of the benefits we tout of preparing an effective story like that is you can use it in other contexts. It's not just an awards nomination, right? You've gone to the effort of distilling inside your organization what are the achievements we want to seek recognition for, doing the work of putting the nomination together and supporting it. That's a story. If you tell that story well, that you can use in other contexts, right? That's a story that's on your organization blog, and you can put out on social media. If you do that well, you can use it in lots of other ways. So resources to help you, we've talked about this, so we won't spend a lot of time on this slide. But again, if you don't have the resources in-house to do this work of putting together an effective nomination, if you don't have an engaged agency you can turn to a specialist like Jackie. If you haven't already gotten the entry kit, get the entry kit, because on the back cover of the entry kit, we list contact information for 3, 4, 5 consultants like Jackie, who you might turn to help you prepare and submit your nominations. And Jackie's contact information is on the back of the entry kit for the Stevie Awards for Great Employers. So I mentioned earlier we would get to this slide. What are some of the top criticisms that we see from Stevie Awards judges about nominations that perhaps they didn't score highly? And one of the benefits of even entering the Stevie Awards is we won't tell you, we'll tell you who all the judges are in general, but we won't tell you which particular judges judged your nominations, and you won't see their scores, but you will see their comments. We do make available to you all the comments from all the judges who reviewed your nominations. And these are some of the most common ones we've seen from judges, that the achievements described were not within the eligibility period, right? That's really important. That there was little to no linkage between the achievements cited and the real world impact of those achievements, right? Nothing happened, nothing exists in a vacuum. We do things for a purpose. That there were no supporting documents or links. And we understand for some types of nominations, it's hard to provide supporting materials, but for an individual, at least provide a link to their LinkedIn profile. For an organization, at least a link to the organization's website, right? So that judges can explore that if they want. That nominations are poorly written with lots of grammatical errors. We understand that sometimes English is not the first language of nominees. We accept nominations from all over the world, and nominations in the Stevie Awards for Great Employers have to be submitted in English. But every writing tool now has a spell checker, has a thesaurus, has a grammar checker. Make sure you run your nomination through those things to make sure that that they are as well written as possible. One of the things we see is if from entrants who wait till the last minute to prepare their nominations, is that they're really tempted to just copy text from company press releases and the company website, and the nomination is just kind of PR and marketing blather and it's too generic. Don't do that, right? You really want to spend the time to craft a unique nomination about the achievements in a way that, I keep using this term, a disinterested third party. That's what a judge is. They can understand and appreciate. You want to make sure that your entry is not too short. Most of the sections in Stevie Awards entry forms require nominations up to a maximum number of words, but you want to make sure that you use that, right? So if a nomination says provide an essay of up to 600 words, don't give us an essay of 250 words. The judges are going to look at that and go, really? You want to take the time to fully explain your achievement to us? It should come pretty close to that. If it's 600, make sure it's at least 450, 500 words. Use the space allowed to really tell and sell your story. And you don't want to use too much of your space allowed in a nomination to basically describe what your organization does, but you do want to use some of it. Just a paragraph, saying our organization was formed in this year, and this is what we've done, and this is how our organization has grown. You can do that in a couple of sentences, but you want to make sure you include it, right? Make sure it's not missing. Jackie, you've entered lots of different awards programs for lots of different clients, not just in Stevie Awards and other competitions. What are some of the comments you've seen from judges about things that they like and don't like?
Well, I have to say on this one, and I couldn't what you said was perfect, Michael. Judges are people. You have to grab them at the very beginning with your story. I'm a judge too, and I get a lot of applications, and I can tell right away in the first paragraph, is this one that's going to tell me a story or not? And that goes for your data and your impact too. So on number 2 and number 5 here, the impact, you need those numbers, but the numbers have to tell the story. They have to back up your story. They're not just numbers. You should be careful with number 6, generic information, because of what you said, Michael, but also now with AI. I had a client who started out with what a great team they were for the team award in HR. And they gave me something to look at. And I said, you know, where did you get this? What is this? And then they confessed basically that they had taken it from AI. And I said, we can't possibly use this. It's extremely generic about a team. It could be any team anywhere in the world. We want to know what's unique about you. And so be careful about that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you
Those would,
mentioned AI, Jackie, because I do want, and this is really important. We really discourage people from using AI to create their entries, especially if they're taking proprietary, non-public information from inside their organization and putting it into something like a tool like ChatGPT or Anthropic to basically craft text for them. Anything that you put into one of those tools is essentially becoming public information. It's being
yes,
contributed to the large language model that's training those tools. So unless you have a proprietary large language model inside your organization so that it will generate text for you and there's a firewall around that, do not do that. You're making a huge mistake. You're essentially making that information public. Um,
yes.
in the age of AI, we've even had to start monitoring the comments of judges because we found that some judges whose first language was not English were using AI tools to basically craft English language comments for them, and we've had to change our rules and tell judges they can't do that. Before we move on from this, I do want to add one other thing because an experience I had with an entrant in the Middle East last week brought this to the fore. In that this is an international competition. We get entries from all over the world, and the judges are also all over the world. Yeah, obviously one of the requirements is they have to be able to read English and understand English. But keep in mind that because the judges are an international lot, they may not necessarily understand the context, the national context of your achievement. The organization that contacted me last week was preparing a nomination for our International Business Awards, and it was about an initiative in the United Arab Emirates related to marriage and supporting people who want to get married young. And they sent the nomination to me for comment, and I read it, and I did not understand, because I'm an American, why they were doing this. And I said, you need to add some context about what's happening in your country. What the conditions are in your country about why the government is encouraging this. And they rewrote it, added a paragraph about how and why people get married in the United Arab Emirates. And the essential issue was marriages there can be really expensive. Weddings can be really expensive. So they wanted to be able to help people who wanted to get married young to encourage alternate ways of getting married. Once they added that context, it was a great entry. So I would encourage you to remember the judges are all over the world, and if you're an American or you're South African, there are cultural contexts in your nation that people in your nation understand, but people in other nations don't. So just remember that you may need to add that context to your entry. Okay, moving on. I'm not going to read this as a really text-heavy slide about the scoring and judging process. Again, you will have access to this slide. You can read it at your leisure, but it describes how we select judges. We get many thousands of applications for people to be judges every year. We only accept a couple hundred every year. People who've been judges in the past who've done a good job for us, we always invite them back. We also traditionally invite last year's winners to be among this year's judges. But the judges are a mixture of new applicants, past judges, and people who won in the competition last year. We will have approximately 200, 250 judges in the Stevie Awards Great Employers this year, and this slide describes how we put them into juries to judge particular groups of categories and how we determine the winners. But again, I'm not going to belabor this. There are links on this slide to some of the gold Stevie Award winning nominations in last year's competition. We encourage you to read last year's winners. They're examples of nominations that judges scored highly and the judges liked, and you can actually read them on the Stevie Awards for Great Employers website. And you can see that these nominations are actually linked on the slide. So if you want to, you can click through the slides to read some of the gold Stevie Award winning nominations in this year's competition. Some of them are from the US, some from elsewhere in the world, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, India, the Philippines. We have winning nominations all over the world. So we encourage you to read those. They're examples of nominations that the judges have scored highly. So let's get to the questions and answers. We're about 15 minutes from the hour. Jackie, you've had an opportunity to comment on most of these slides before we get to the questions and answers. And again, those of you who tuned in today, we appreciate your being here. If you have questions for us, please submit them through the chat, and we will dedicate the last few minutes of this program to answering your questions. Jackie, any other comments on any of what we've covered today before we get to questions and answers?
I did want to emphasize what you had put in that slide about things that judges had found. You have this gift of a certain amount of words to use. This one, yes. So number 7, use every word. Words are precious, and the more you can tell your story, the better. So be sure to use every word. And the same thing with number 3. Be sure you can include, it says optional, and I understand that technically it's optional to include supporting materials, but I tell my clients it's not optional. This is our ability to show, to have a visual if we choose not to do the video. This is a terrific opportunity to make it real. You can see that person, you can see what they look like. It's really a great thing. And so I encourage everyone to be sure and put as many supporting pieces as you can of documentation. And Michael is right. He is very good about being on it, and he is so responsive. I've never had an awards before in which the founder actually emailed me back and said, hey, your link doesn't work. And so I found that to be so helpful and responsive. So
our general help box is help@stevieawards.com. And again, we'll have a screen where we show people these things. And we have one person who does nothing but monitor that and respond to that. But sometimes I do, like if I'm at home watching
yes.
television, I'll go on my phone and see who's posed questions to us. So I do that sometimes as well. One thing I do want to mention here, but now I forgot what I was going to say. Sometimes people ask us, what's the ideal number of supporting materials, right? In terms of links, uploads. We recommend no more than 10. Because again, judges are people. If you provide, 30 supporting materials, they're not even going to know where to begin, right? So just distill whatever you want to the top 10 pieces of material and include that. One other thing I want to mention, a workaround, sometimes people will email us and say, it's asking for 600 words, but I really can't tell this story in less than 800 words. A workaround, and remember this one, a workaround is provide the first 600 words where it asks for 600 words, but at the end say, if you'd like to read more of this story, see this particular supporting file and put the rest of the text in one of the supporting documents, in a Word document or a PDF. That's a good workaround for that. Okay. So let's get to our questions. We have at least one of our staff has been monitoring the questions that you all have been submitting through the chat, and let's have it.
Yes, we have quite a few questions. Someone asked for the Employer of the Year categories. Do we select which category, or is it automated? She said we're under a 250 headcount in both telecom and computer software. We're trying to determine if there's a better category or if we should apply to 2 of the Employer of the Year categories.
Well, there are 35, I believe, maybe 36 Employer of the Year categories by industry group. So it's not real fine grained. So it's software. It's not software, artificial intelligence, or software, HR technology. It's software. But yeah, one of the questions we get most often from people is, there are 3 or 4 categories that we could fit our entry into. We can only enter one. Which one should we enter? We will always direct you to the category that historically, at least, has gotten fewer entries. So for example, under Employer of the Year, if you fit under both software and telecommunications, we would say go with telecommunications if you can enter only one category, because historically it's gotten fewer entries.
Next question. Someone asked, if we won in the Middle East and North Africa Stevie Awards in 2025, can we submit that same nomination into Great Employers?
Of course. Yeah, of course. If the category fits and the time frame is the same, yes, you can. But you have to make sure that the submission requirements are identical. I don't believe that they're identical between the Middle East and North Africa Stevie Awards and the Great Employers. The word limit may be seen different, the number of questions may be different. So make sure that you're not fitting a round peg in a square hole. Make sure that if the questions are different, that you modify the format of your nomination before you submit it.
Someone asked, can we send over our entries for comment? And I replied in the chat, yes, you're welcome to send them to michael@stevieawards.com. And you'll see Jackie's email also under award-winning results.
So I just changed the slide.
Mhm.
You can see my email address
Mhm.
there. And again, no obligation. If you've prepared your nomination and just want some honest feedback on how good I think it is, send it to me and I will give you the feedback. Again, it's not going to hurt you. I'm not a judge. I'm just an administrator. We want to see you do well. And here you can see listed some of the consulting companies that work with organizations around the world to prepare and submit nominations. They're not all in the US. Some are in other countries. We have one who's listed there in Turkey, who's who submits mostly Turkish entries, but also other organizations. We have one in the UK, a couple in Australia and New Zealand. Jackie's in the US. Some of these others are in other countries. But these are by no means the only consultants. Next question.
Someone asked, are HR achievement categories open to public vote too? How does this public vote work?
Yeah, the public vote is only for the Employer of the Year categories. So in July, we will open the public vote, and every nomination that to that point has been submitted to one or more of the Employer of the Year categories will be included in one or more Employer of the Year public vote categories. And we will give you tools if you're in one of those nominees that you can use to add promotional text and images to your social media postings, to your email signatures, to encourage your social media followers, customers, and others, obviously employees, to vote for your organization. And once the public vote closes, and again, only for the Employer of the Year categories, for every 1,000 votes you get, we'll add a full point. So if you get 500 votes, we'll add half a point. If you get 250 votes, we'll add 0.25 points to your average score as received from the professional judges.
We have a few questions about the best types of documents to submit as supporting materials. Someone asked, what are the best supporting materials to add?
Well, obviously it depends on the category, right? So I've mentioned a couple of times the types of materials that should be submitted when nominating a non-executive HR employee, such as a benefits specialist. Obviously, a testimonial letter from a manager talking about how effective that person has been during the eligibility window is going to be ideal. A link to that person's LinkedIn profile is going to be ideal. Maybe that person's photograph will be ideal. If you're nominating an internal HR event, maybe or an orientation program, maybe you want to submit the promotional materials or notice materials about that event, some photographs of that event, a video recording of the event. It really depends on the category. Again, that's one of the things you can ask us, right? Either me or the help@stevieawards.email address. I think we have that here somewhere. There we do. Once you've narrowed down your category, if you want to ask us what are the types of materials that you ideally should be submitted for that category, by all means ask us. We'll give you our opinion.
Someone asked if it's better for the judges if they combine their supporting materials into a PowerPoint or Word document to make it easier for the judges.
Not necessarily. It depends on the types of materials. One of the things that you're going to want to do when you upload a file to our system, you can give it a name. And it's important that the name be representative of what the file is, so that if you've got multiple supporting materials, the name tells the judges what the file is. And that's really important. If it's just a URL, an exposed URL, it really doesn't help the judges understand what that file is. It's really, I think it's better to keep the supporting materials separate so that you can name them each individually. So the judges, as they're going through your entry and the supporting materials, know what it is that you're asking them to click on.
This question is kind of similar. Someone asked, is it better to have longer supporting materials or a few pieces of support materials that back up the achievements?
I don't think there's a good answer to that. It depends on your nomination. You know, in some cases, you know, if you're nominating an internal HR related event, you may want to submit a video that's, you know, a couple of minutes long that just shows what the event was like. It doesn't have to be a 10-minute video of the entire or 1 hour video of the entire event. It just needs to be a representative sample illustrating for the judges what the event was like and the effort you went and what the outcome is. It doesn't have to be long. It just has to be effective in telling the story. Anything you want to add to that, Jackie? I mean, you're well experienced in strategizing what type of supporting materials.
No, I agree. And I
Mm.
actually look for, if possible, diversity of examples. So there was this publication and there was a press release and here's a live event. And it's the quality of what you're submitting and their direct correlation in support of the impact. That's what you're looking for, is quality and the visualization and something that tells the impact. So I try to mix it up and have a website and a lot of different things in the supporting material.
The next question is, how many companies apply per category on average?
Well, the 80-20 rule applies in any Stevie Awards competition as it does in most things in life. 20% of the entries get 80% of 20% of the categories get 80% of the entries. So we have some categories that get a lot of entries. We have some categories that get not so many. And you know, we never publish the number of entries a particular category gets, only an aggregate. But again, as I said earlier, if there are 2 or 3 categories that your entry would fit in, and you can only enter one, you only have budget for one entry fee, for example, you know, you can let us know which 3 categories you're thinking of, and you know, if there's some historical evidence for those particular categories, if they're not new, we will always point you towards the one that historically has gotten the fewer entries. Because obviously you want, you know, you may have a great entry, but the more entries that are in your category, the more likely is that there's one that's even better. You know, frankly, you know, we often hear from people that, you know, we're pleased that we got a silver, but, you know, the judges had really wonderful things to say about our entry. We're wondering why we didn't get the gold. Well, you didn't get the gold because there was one that the judges thought was better. And just, you know, you got a great score, you got great comments, but there was one with a higher average score. That's less likely to happen if you're in a category that gets fewer entries. And we'll help you figure out what that is if you email us and say, you know, which of these particular categories historically gets fewer entries.
The next question, how do judges feel about redacted documents being submitted as supporting material? Does the full document have to be submitted? Do judges ever come back and ask for additional documentation?
No, they never do. Well, it depends on the redaction. As long as they understand why you've made redactions, right? So there's typically a section where you can explain or at least provide some context to the supporting materials you provided. If you need to redact some information from a document, just, you know, tell them what was redacted. Just say, you know, we wanted to share this document with you, but we've had to redact certain figures because they're not public, and they'll understand that. Just give them some context.
I think that was all of our current questions. If anyone has any more, feel free to type them in the chat now.
Okay, well, I'm gonna close off and say thank you to Jackie. But Maggie, if we have any more questions, go ahead and interrupt us. We are almost at the hour, so we've stayed within our time. Yay for us. We thank you for joining us today. If you're still with us, thanks for staying. But again, if you're not there, you're obviously seeing a recording of this, which we're going to send to everyone. And you'll also get access to all the slides. The early bird deadline again is next week. Entry fees will go up slightly after that deadline. There's a quote unquote final deadline in May, but then we'll continue to accept late entries with payment of a late fee into June. But even the free categories will require payment of the late fee in June. So if you're allergic to paying entry fees and you want to enter one of the free categories, make sure you do that through the May entry deadline. Thank you again, Jackie, for joining us today and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
And again, you know, if you prepared your entry and just want some feedback from it, you're welcome to email it to me, michael@stevieawards.com, or to our general help desk, which is help@stevieawards.com. Turn to Jackie only if you really need help getting started and preparing your entries. So thank you again. Any more questions at the last second, Maggie?
Nope, that was all.
Okay, well, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day and good luck in this year's Stevie Awards for Great Employers.